Today's story is one of the reasons that we created Long Island Backstory. As we know, here on Long Island, most of the news is controlled by Cablevision and Newsday, which is one company. In my opinion, they don't report everything that we really need to hear and see about on Long Island. That's because they're afraid that if they upset any of the politicians who may be making decisions on cases that are in front of them or judges, that they'll upset them. We need alternative news. Of course, it's important to have national news. Everybody knows that. We need to know what's going on in the world, but we also need to know what's going on in our own backyards here on Long Island, and specifically in Suffolk County. Today's story is on 103.9 Long Island News Radio with their morning host, Jay Oliver. In my opinion, this radio station really serves a purpose here on Long Island, and we need to support it. What they do is they tell the local stories that the large media won't tell us. Today we're going to hear how they get these stories and any influences they get, and we're going to hear about our host and how he got involved in this.
Grew up in Queens, in Bayside, great little town out there on Corporal Kennedy Street, and folks moved out to the island in the 80s in Massapequa Park.
You have the perfect voice for radio. When did you realize that radio was something you wanted to do? Was this a lifelong dream of yours?
Quick story. My grandfather was an avid radio listener, and the reason was he had cataracts in his eyes. So he went for surgery, and unfortunately the surgery didn't turn out that well. He started hemorrhaging his eyes. So basically he was legally blind. So he couldn't watch TV, couldn't watch the news, loved the news. So he started turning on the radio. And as a kid, I used to basically be with him a lot because he was a great guy. And he turned me on the radio. I said, "Grandpa, what are you listening to?" He said, "The Bob Grant Show." Okay, great. And I started to get hooked on it myself. And then all of a sudden it became a way of life for me. Where radio, I just turned on the radio even when I wasn't with him. And I used to love talk radio. This is how I got started. From talk radio, we heard about sports talk and everything else, and it just evolved for me.
And how did you end up here at Long Island News Radio?
Well, do you remember the story of Ted Washington, the guy who was in Columbus, Ohio? He was a homeless guy, and a guy just came up to a stop sign, happened to be a producer. That wasn't me, though.
That was a great story.
How did I come here? I came here basically, believe it or not, as a salesperson. And, the group has 4 radio stations. And in the midst of my sales regime there, it was told to me that the rock station, WRCN, the classic rock station, would become an all-news station. And it was asked of me, based on my background and everything else, if I'd be interested. And I said, absolutely. When is this thing going to get going? And anyway, the process started, and we were all getting jazzed up about it. And it took a while, but it was well worth it, and that's basically how it came about. It wasn't an automatic thing where, okay, they're doing news here. I'm answering an ad of some kind. It was just, kind of being in the right place at the right time, knowing my background, management did. And basically asked me, would you like to do the morning, be a morning anchor, so to speak? And I said, yeah.
One of the reasons we created Long Island Backstory is because we don't feel that there are enough local news outlets here on Long Island. And national news is important for all of us. We need to know what goes on in the world, but we need to know what goes on in our own backyard here on Long Island. And it's sort of... this isn't what goes on in the rest of the world. Long Island sort of does things differently. We pay more than everybody else in taxes. Our politicians are differently. What is your feeling on local news coverage and the availability of it here on Long Island?
Not enough, basically. And I think that's what the CEO of the company had in mind, too. You have basically one newspaper. You have one TV station, and not everybody gets that one TV station. If you have Cablevision, you get it. What is needed here, or what was needed here for the longest of time, was an all-news talk station. Because, quite frankly, when you're in your car, and by the way, geographically on Long Island, to get from point A to point B, we all do it. We are in our car a lot wherever we go. We know that. There's traffic everywhere, going and coming home. So we know that. And how frustrating is it when you're stuck in traffic? Who wants to know about the Midtown Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, when I'm by 112
Absolutely.
on Sunrise Highway, exit 64? Right. So that was the whole problem. And then, by the way, it's a true story. It happened to me. I'm on Sunrise before the station even got started. 45 minutes I'm stuck. Somebody wanted to jump over the overpass. Had no way of finding out. Had to call somebody for them to go on the internet, for them to tell me the reason why I have not moved in 45 minutes on the Sunrise Highway a year and a half ago. But this is what the station provides, okay? It provides local information, local traffic, local weather patterns, and, of course, the all-important local news stories, because that's what we care about. We care about what's happening in Oakdale and Sayville rather than Ridgewood, Queens, and Passaic, New Jersey. No one cares about that. They want to know what's happening in their backyard, and I think that's why it's kind of taken charge.
Definitely, the traffic is definitely something I agree with you. When I'm sitting out here and I'm not even going to the city, I don't care what's going on those other areas. So the traffic is big. But can you give us an example of some stories that you've covered here in your station that probably wouldn't have got picked up by the other organizations where on your station, you have more time to talk. And I think when you watch some of these other news organizations, you have a 30-second clip to get it through. Here, when you have a story, you really develop it more over the course of the morning. Can you give us an example of some stories that you covered that, if it weren't for you, would not have made it out into the news?
One that comes to mind is I got a call from a marketing person for a law firm. And they wanted to know if I was interested in doing a story about one of their clients. Client happened to be a 16-year-old kid in the Farmingdale area who was bullied relentlessly for a couple of years to the point where it was ruining his life. And, this is the type of story that I think a lot of people can relate to with kids. And I said, let's bring them in. Absolutely. So they came in. The kid, the parents, the lawyer, we had a conversation. It was a riveting conversation for about an hour. And he told his story. He told his story how basically his life had changed. His parents noticed it. Long story short, they filed a lawsuit and won. Not many of those situations happen where they sued the district. And guess what? District caved in. They had a settlement out of this. And I think it's important to tell a story like that because at least it shows people that you have a kid in our community who is suffering to the point where, he wanted to take his own life. And these are the type of issues and stories that I think hit home. Because of that story, by the way, 2 other networks called me for contact information. So I think we did the right thing there. We basically brought light to a very important topic, and other people picked up on it.
Well, I can tell you, Jay, from experience, and one of the stories that you covered recently was the story of Dr. Carlos Rivera, who just had a horror story in the court system, and I was involved in that, and you had me as a guest on the show. And I could tell you, number one, it's important to get the story out. Because like you said, if people know about it, they get outraged and it makes people react. But it's also just as important for the person you're doing the story. I'm sure for that child, he never really had the chance to tell his story to everybody. And here was a place with a friendly audience that was giving him the time to really tell his story and get the story out there.
Again, I think it helped him tremendously. This is a kid who's going to be going into the Air Force. I said, when you get your wings, you're going to come back here on the show. He felt good about himself. It almost felt like he's finally telling his story, and you can just see the weight off his back. And the parents also, were feeling it. And the lawyer just thanked me after the show, and it was a really nice situation. As far as Dr. Rivera, listen, if we can somehow make a point of what's happening in the family court system, so that other people might not have to experience those types of things, then I think we're doing our job. This is one of the other things that you mentioned, what we bring to the table here. I think a lot of people are interested in their politicians, their local politicians. You're not going to hear that on city stations. You want to be able to get a feel for people, exactly what they're feeling, the questions they want to ask. And we're able to bring on local congressmen and supervisors and town councilmen and legislators, and we're able to kind of dissect the issues and see exactly how they're going to respond, whether they're assembly people, whether they're in Albany every other week. How are they going to tackle the issues that you and I face on Long Island? We want to know about property taxes. Well, how are you going to solve it? We want to know about the school system. How are you going to solve those issues? fact of the matter is we live in a place where a lot of people are frustrated and they want answers. You're not going to get that from stations that are operating out of New York City, and that's what the local feel does for people.
I don't really know how the big news companies work, but I can tell you that there are a lot of stories that people send in, they write in, I being one of them, and they just don't cover them. And I don't know if they sit in a boardroom and they say, you know what, let's not talk about this story because we may upset this judge and we may be in front of that judge one day. How does it work here at Long Island News Radio? Do you get filtered through, or do you pretty much get to choose your story and go with it? Or do you have to answer to a big board who says, you know what, Jay, you may offend this person. Let's just do a vanilla story that really won't make a big difference, but it'll get us to the next commercial.
One of the good things about this station is we get to choose as far as what we want to do. A lot of this particular show that we do in the morning is a networking type of situation. A lot of people know about the show, know about what we bring to the table, and a lot of people contact us. And, if we feel that it's a really good story to tell and get the people in the studio, we're going to do it. We've done that a lot already. We did that with a woman whose son overdosed on drugs, started a foundation. What's needed as far as moving the needle for her, so to speak, as far as advancing so that we don't fall back, take 2 or 3 steps backwards regarding the drug situation. It's stuff like that, it's almost like an instinct. It's an intuitive feeling we get, whereas what the right story is going to be to put on the air so that we can hit home with it. We want to make sure that we kind of hit people's souls and hearts so that we answer their questions too, and we get a lot of positive feedback. Today we had on a guy who was talking about colleges and what you need to know as far as looking at colleges for your kids. There's a lot of obstacles out there than it was 10, 15 years ago. It's a whole new game now. So to alert people in that regard gives me a pretty good feeling, saying, you know what, we did a pretty good job today. Hopefully people got the message, that type of thing.
I listen to your show in the morning now, probably maybe for the last 3 or 4 months I've been listening to it, and when I'm not in the car and I can't get it, I do listen to it on the internet, and it comes across to me that you're passionate about all the stories that you do. That's why I asked the questions about who choose them, because it seems like you care about every story. Living here in Suffolk County, and I think you have 3 children of your own, what issues are you concerned about as a resident here in Suffolk County? What issues are you passionate about?
Well, just as far as the kids are concerned, definitely drugs, because I think it's a huge issue, and it's an issue that's not going away. And you're seeing a lot of the schools now tackle these issues with a lot of different programs. There's mentoring programs. We had the county executive in here a couple of weeks ago in Steve Ballone. These are types of issues that they are really looking at now. And it's no longer, an issue where, okay, we're going to sweep it on the rug, it's going to go away. It's an issue that is growing constantly, and you got to attack it. I think people are fed up in general with Long Island as far as taxes. I mean, it's the same old story. It's property taxes. It's never going to go down. It's almost like a way of life. We seem to be in a malaise in our lifestyle because the cost of living here is beyond, between the utilities and between their taxes and going to the grocery store. I mean, how much money is left in the paycheck after this? These are real issues, and we have to get the people that are involved in these issues on a daily basis, and that's what we try and do on this show.
Obviously, the morning show is the most important show on the radio station. So listen, but that is the place where a lot of people were in the car in the morning and we're paying attention. Tell me about some of the other stories that you have on the show, some of the other local politicians that you have throughout the rest of the week and on the weekends.
Well, Frank's on from 2 to 3, does a great job. He'll interview politicians, he'll interview entertainers. He kind of mixes it up. I heard an interview driving last week. He had Ronnie Cox on, one of the old-time great actors. He's also a folk singer. It's that type of thing that he brings to the table. It's not always about hard politics all the time. Frank being of the Independence Party and everything else. We know it gets heated during election time. But he covers the gambit pretty much. Does a great job. John Gomez does a wonderful job. He keeps it local from 12 to 2. He tackles a lot of the stuff as well, a lot of the political issues. He gets right into it. He gets a lot of great guests on, and I think the people respond to those types of shows because in John Gomez's case, again, he keeps it local. And a lot of people want to hear what's happening in their backyard rather than what always goes on in Washington, so to speak. A lot of people want to know what's happening in Albany. A lot of people want to know what's happening on Long Island, and this is what Gomez does. And then we have some syndication programming, with Sean Hannity and Mark Levin, and they do a great job. A lot of people, listen to those types of shows as well. Out here on the island, so out on the East End. So it definitely serves a purpose. And then on the weekend, we have block programming in which we cover a lot of different topics, whether it be wellness guys, whether it be a chiropractor, whether it be somebody who can predict the future. There's a lot of prognostication is one of the biggest shows on this type of radio station. So there's a lot of different categories of what would work, and I think we break it up pretty well.
So tell us the difference. There are other outlets on the radio as people are driving. They have 1010, they have 880, they have ABC. What's the difference between some of those New York City AM stations and Long Island News Radio?
I think what makes us different in the morning is we're going to give you traffic and weather 6 times an hour. We do it every 10 minutes on the 5s. We're going to give you the news stories, and we're going to give you 20 to 25 news stories an hour. I think what makes us different, though, is we intertwine those stories with the newsmakers and breakers of those stories. We'll get them on the air and ask them questions right then and there. So I think when you put everything together as far as news, traffic, weather, sports, we have entertainment, we have a medical minute, you put all that together with some of the people that we have on answering those tough questions as far as, being in the news and whatnot. I think that's what sets us apart from all other stations involved in this type of format. And I think that's why we've scored pretty well here.
I personally think it's refreshing to have this to have another option out there. I know I was tuned into one of those local cable vision shows, and I would listen to it in the morning, but I would just get these short clips, and I'd leave saying, I really didn't get any information. By the time I got in the car, I'd say, really, what did I pick up here? I just saw the basic vanilla stories that are out there. And to me, when I started listening to your show, and actually I listen to the station all the time now whenever I can get it, and I listen to some of these other shows that you talked about, I really feel like I'm part of the community. And that's something on Long Island that, listen, we are a community. And I think we've been losing that, again, when our media is basically controlled by Newsday and Cablevision, we sort of lose that local feel. And I think one of the things that your station does is it brings us together as a community. So for the viewers, where they can listen to it, they can get on FM 103.9. If you can't get it, I live in Smithtown, and the signal's a little bit iffy there, but I listen to it LongIslandNewsRadio.com. Right. You can listen to it live streaming in the morning. Also, if you hear about a story that you like, you can get the story. They're archived the next day, and they can go in and pull up an archive story. Jay, if somebody has a story that they want to tell, how do they reach you, and will somebody get back to them, or does it just fall into the black hole like it would if we sent it to the New York Times?
It'll never do that. I investigate every phone call that I get, whether it's a fundraiser, it doesn't matter to me. I look into everything. And if it's a fundraiser, you know what? I want people to know about it too, because if it's for a good cause and we can put awareness to that particular situation, we're going to do that. If anybody has a story, something, an idea, and they want to contact me, they can go right to the website at linewsradio.com, and there's a comment page there that somebody will be able to get in touch with me. It's very important that I invite that for people to be in communication with me. This isn't just a show in which we sit behind the microphone for 4 hours, we do our thing, and then we leave, we kind of wash our hands, and we get ready for the next day. When we leave here, we get a lot of inquiries. We get a lot of questions. I'm probably in the studio almost another hour after the show, answering a few emails, investigating who we're going to put on the next day based on some of the situations that arise in the news. So it's a constant process, and we're not done there either. I go home at night, and I'm looking through things and left and right, and this is a long day. It's a 19-hour day. and we put a lot of heart and soul into this show, and I've got others that work on this show too. And I want to give props to George, and I want to give props to Mike and the great Chris Sierra sitting in the other room. But the news cycle is not just a 4 to 6 hour cycle. It's a 24-hour cycle. It's something you have to be aware of, and we're very aware of that. And when we get information in, when we get a story idea, we investigate, we make calls, and then we go with it, and such the case. In your case, I remember meeting you with Dr. Rivera through another individual that we both know. It was brought to my attention, and in speaking to Dr. Rivera, to me it hit home. If we can alert somebody out there who's going through a similar situation and have them avoid the horror show that Dr. Rivera is going through, you know what? I think we've done our job here. But that's the type of stuff that I'd like to kind of put on the air and investigate. So it's a never-ending cycle.
Well, Jay, thank you. I have to say you are a real gem here on Long Island. We really appreciate it. And I have to say you practice what you preach. This isn't just talk. When we came in here and did this show, you said, look, if there's another story like this that needs to be exposed, you bring it in and we're going to expose it. So I thank you for that. We really need more people like you here on Long Island. You do a great, great service. I hope everybody that watches this show will tune into the station and become a listener. But one more note, your voice. People have to recognize you when you go someplace. How many times has somebody said, hey, I think I know you, or I recognize your voice, I just don't know where?
Well, I tell you, Gary, I'm glad you brought that up in closing. It's about the implants. No, I'm only kidding, because after the show, I sound like Alfred and the Chipmunks. I'll tell you a quick story. This is a true story that happened to me. I tell this story in the last couple of weeks to at least 10 or 12 different people. I was in a medical building talking with a doctor. He wants to come on the show. And we were talking, and this gentleman comes beside me, and I noticed just from the corner of my eye that he was impaired, visually impaired. He was on the arm of a nice lady, had a little cane, and as I'm passing him and I'm talking to the doctor, he yells out my name, and I respond. I said, "Yeah, that's me," and he says to me, I listen to your show every morning. I love it. I love the sports guy, the whole thing. And I said, wow, I could not believe. I said, thank you. I said, keep listening. I said, what's your name? He tells me his name, and a name I'll never forget because his name was Michael Jordan. Now, obviously, he wasn't Michael Jordan, the basketball player. But I said to him, I tell you what, Mr. Jordan, I appreciate you listening. I said, I want you to listen real carefully tomorrow morning, meaning the next morning, because I'm going to give you a nice little shout out. And I did. I actually told the story twice, and I hope he felt good, and I appreciated the fact that he listens, and I thought it was so great that this man is, the only way he can really kind of get what's happening in and around his area is obviously listen to the radio or the internet. And I thought it was a great thing, and I really had a little spring in my step the rest of the day because that's somebody I want to hear from. But what are the odds of that happening? An individual is visually impaired, hears my voice just in conversation in passing, and yells out, "I love your show." I mean, if that doesn't do it for you, what does? But that's an example, I think, of you mentioned the voice. The voice is the voice, but I think the service. I'm hoping the service that I provide in the morning to that particular individual. I hope I do that for many individuals. So.
Well, I can tell you definitely do make a difference. And again, I appreciate it, and I appreciate everything you do. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for having me on your show, and look forward to being back. And today's segment, Spotlight on the Crew, we have my good friend, Phil Antonucci.
How you doing?
Phil is a lifetime resident of Smithtown, and without Phil, this show really wouldn't be possible. Phil handles our B-roll, which, as we know, Phil takes the extra shots that you see zooming across the set. They go into the background and they make the shows more interesting, so we don't have just a bunch of talking heads. Phil is an extra cameraman. He helps with the sound. He helps with the set, and also to top it off, if that's not enough, Phil also does all of the show's social media. He does the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, and we can't forget the Google Plus, which Phil is starting to build up.
Live TV.
Live TV. Phil's getting us set up so that when we start doing some of these interviews, we can actually show them live on the Google Plus. So look us up on any of those sites. And again, thank you very much, Phil. A lot of hard work, and without you, we couldn't be doing this.
Thank you.
Today's Spotlight on the Crew. We're here at Long Island MacArthur Airport with my friend Donald Caulfield. Don lives in Bayshore with his parrot, Rainbow. And Don is very important to the crew. Don helps when we have a set. He helps set up all the scenery. He helps carry in all the cameras. He also helps us with a second camera on me so we can do some cutaway shots. And Don is just always available. This guy is a salt of the earth, doesn't have a mean bone in his body. All he wants to do is help people, and he's doing that every day, helping us out on the show. Thanks again, Don. I appreciate all your help. We really couldn't do this show without you. You're a good friend, and we appreciate it here at Long Island Backstory.
Think being a big sister means you have to spend all day stuck in a library? Think again. To learn more about becoming a big brother or big sister, call 1-888-412-BIGS.
You'd never know it on the battlefield, but nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital. I feel like a fish with no water.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor. Because even one attack is one too many.
Introducing the all-new Enclave. It's a minivan to the max, with features like remote control sliding rear doors, 150 cable channels, a full sky view roof, temperature-controlled cup holders, and the 6-point navigation system. It's the minivan for families on the go.